then
good afternoon, everybody. It's Che Ritter here to talk about some ESSER funds in construction. We're going to take a little time this afternoon, and the presentation is relatively short. And we're going to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. And with me, I've got at least 3 or 4 of my facilities staff with us. So hopefully we can clear up any questions you have today. And we're going to go ahead and jump right into this and start the discussion. Now, for my finance people who are listening in, this is pretty much what I did at CASBO if you were in attendance there, but we've added a few things. And Thelma's presentation is not part of this one. This is just the construction side. So it's going to be a little more specific to that topic because at CASBO we talked more about construction and the rest of the ESSER funds and how those could be used. So Oksana, if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the first simple question is, can you use ESSER funds for construction and renovations? And in short, yes. If you go and look at the guidance, there's quite a bit of discussion in the guidance about construction and how you can use it, but there's a few things you need to really answer and focus on if your district's going to choose to use ESSER funds for construction. Primarily, you want to make sure that we're following all the requirements and applicable laws. The cost must be necessary and reasonable. And this statement right here about preventing, preparing, and responding to COVID-19, I'll probably have to get that tattooed on my back at some point because I've said it a lot this last year, is you want to make sure the focus is right there. So whatever you're planning on doing, I think it would be wise to continually think about how is this preventing, preparing for, or responding to COVID-19. And of course, it must be consistent with the proper and efficient administration of those programs of the CARES Act, the CRRSA Act, or the ARP Act. And throughout this presentation, I'll use the word ESSER 1,000 times, and that covers all these ESSER funds just for the sake of simplicity. All right, Oksana, the next slide, please. So recently, the kind of life cycle of this is we've reached out to the U.S. Department of Education a few times to get some clarification on some specific questions we had throughout the last probably year or so. And one of the questions, or what we usually do, is we'll stack up some questions for them. And they have, I think, kind of a work group, if you will, that will sit down and go through these questions. And we're not sure what the other states are asking, but we've asked quite a few about, kind of narrowing down and saying, well, what else can we use these funds for? And can we use it for these type of specific projects? And the answers we get back to them are very general. And they're not really telling us yes or no. What they're telling us is, go back to the original focus of, again, you'll see preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID-19, but also look at the cost of each of these projects. And one thing we're really trying to focus more on too is the primary use of these projects. So a lot of what the projects that we see right now, HVAC is obviously a pretty easy one to improve the air quality in the building. Windows, the replacement of windows, especially in older buildings, is a pretty straightforward. It's going to improve ventilation. You may see some bathroom renovations and some other renovations that sort of expand out space, or renovations, and I've seen this a lot lately, it seems like, that are taking over an area that wasn't used, and now it's going to sort of convert it into a larger classroom area, so you have more spacing between students. And all these are fairly reasonable requests and pretty straightforward. And then you'll have a few that come in, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that might not be so straightforward, or we may need to talk to the district a little bit to understand the need a little better. But basically, U.S. Department of Education has repeatedly said the same thing, which is, make sure whatever the funds are being used for falls into this box of preventing, preparing for, and responding to. And there's some other points to their answer that we'll walk through in just a few minutes. Oksana, we can go to the next slide, please. So obviously, we're talking about construction that can include new renovations, alterations, or remodeling. You can go to the next slide, Oksana, and you'll notice the asterisk next to new construction. So as you look through their documentation, and this goes back quite a ways, I think since May, they had issued some new guidance, and the U.S. Department of Education actually stated they discourage new construction, as this may limit your ability to support other essential needs and initiatives. Now, discourage is an interesting word. So the other part of this conversation is about if you have a facility that's aged and not in great shape, and building new would make more sense than renovating. That's a different conversation, and obviously still has to fit into that preventing and preparing for COVID. But as you look at their logic, which is this money has a lifespan, and I think ESSER 3 goes out to, I want to say, September of 2024. So some of these projects, and in light of our recent, sort of, I think, labor market demands, as well as material and getting construction companies on site, there may be some issues with timing. And the demand for these construction companies, I know the demand in other industries is very high right now. So you need to really think that through to make sure you're going to have plenty of time to finish. Any delays in getting material, or in the next 6 months, what does that all look like? Will you be able to get steel? Will you be able to get, concrete? Will you be able to get all these things you need? Or is there going to be long delays in that? And those delays could push you past that deadline, and that creates a whole other set of problems that we don't want any district to deal with. So always keep that in mind. And that's why I say be very mindful of award end dates. That's probably one of the biggest things I think you can think about with construction. We're starting to see a lot of what I would call sort of a change in the construction industry. We're starting to see, price increases, limited supply of materials and things like that. And we're starting to, kind of hear that rumor, if you will. So keep that in mind, and, do some planning, and maybe even contingency planning is probably not a bad idea. So of course, with this, the burden always remains on all of us to maintain the appropriate documentation. As you all go through and spend your ESSER funds, as we're reviewing these, especially construction projects, yours truly is on the hook for this too. So we want to make sure we have it documented. We want to make sure we do it right. So when they come and look, and they will, we have all the documentation in order and everything is on the up and up. So next slide, Oksana. Thank you. So these are just some of the items to consider, and you can kind of read more about these in the documentation that I'll list at the end. The environmental impact assessment. And some of these will never apply to you all, and some might, but these are just more to be aware of. The probable effects of proposed construction, if it's eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, ensuring the possession of facility for 50 years or the useful life of the facility. Can it be completed in a reasonable time period? And does it comply with, all the disability acts, federal, state, and local health and safety standards, et cetera? Pretty routine stuff. Oksana, you can go to the next one, please. And even more compliance is it functional, economical, not elaborate in design or extravagant use of materials? Basically, you don't want it on the front page of your local paper. Do you have the operational funds to operate and maintain? And this was an interesting one because some districts have asked about, doing something outside of their sort of school buildings, if you will. And it may be, some kind of health center or something like that, but you've got to have the operational funds to actually operate and maintain. And in the event that you no longer need, if you purchase equipment or the property, you've got to talk to U.S. Department of Ed about how to get rid of that and surplus it and things like that. And one thing I think that, as we've talked about different projects and things, to always keep in mind is, and I actually will, give credit to one of my architects and project managers for mentioning this one day in the call, is, when you look at these projects that we see and we talk about how's this preventing COVID, well, it makes it very easy for anyone to look at it and say, well, this is how it's preventing COVID, but you want to have documented uses. Meaning if you add 2 classrooms to your school, you need to have those classrooms actually being used by classes. And you need to have that documented. If you buy a bus, for example, with ESSER funds, and you say, well, we're going to expand our routes, or we're going to put spread out our kids more, you need to have that documented, because when they come and ask, if that's right in front of them, they'll see it too, to say, yep, you actually spread your kids out. That was a good use of the money, and they'll move on. So always keep that in mind. If you're going to say you're going to do something with these funds, make sure you can document it and, show that, yes, we've used it for that purpose. Go ahead, Oksana, to the next one. And so the last ones, since we see a lot of HVAC projects coming through, just make sure they're following ASHRAE standards. And I think our project managers and your architects can obviously talk to you more about that than I can. Go ahead, Oksana, to the next one. So this one's one I'll admit, when this started, I knew very, very little about, and probably know even less now. But Davis-Bacon, aka Prevailing Wage. So some of you remember we had Prevailing Wage in the Commonwealth of Kentucky for state projects, and that was removed by the General Assembly. But since this is federal money, you'll see pretty quickly that it doesn't take a lot to trigger Prevailing Wage, $2,000. So that's pretty much every project we've seen come through, I think, has been well over that. And so I believe that we've talked to a handful of architects and others, and this isn't a big shock to them or anything. So I think many of them have experience of dealing with this. But we reached out, Greg Dunbar's group and I reached out to the Department of Labor and found a guy named Matt Jackson. If you can go to the next slide there, Oksana. Matt works for the Department of Labor, and he is there to help you all. I was on a call with him in a district, but he's there to help kind of answer questions. And it's a little different than probably what you're used to. When you call him, he will, he may have to get back to you, but they want to provide very consistent answers. And keep in mind that Matt's not worked with school districts before very often, and he doesn't know a lot about our fund sources and the way a lot of our things work. So he appreciates you actually explaining this stuff to him. He's a super nice guy and very helpful. And so conveniently, I believe, I'm going to get the date wrong, January 5th, I think it is, we're trying to get him on a webinar for you all to attend. And we can, he's going to do, I think, a presentation for us and answer some questions about Prevailing Wage and how it would work. So keep that in mind in January. But if you do need answers before then, absolutely reach out. He is expecting calls and emails from you all. So don't hesitate to do that. Oksana, you can go to the next slide, please. So as these projects come in, if I want you to imagine for a second, you're going to plan on doing, I don't know, we'll just call it a cafeteria renovation using ESSER funds. You want to, put some new flooring in that's easier to clean. You want to put some barriers up, whatever it is that's going to qualify for the ESSER funds. There's still a BG process. There's still state laws and regulations we have to follow. ESSER is not going to change that. But what has changed is that Greg Dunbar's group, the district facilities branch, will review it and, just like they usually do. And then as they see ESSER funds are on there, it does come to me for kind of a final review. Now, if it's pretty straightforward, these get reviewed and we'll make a decision fairly quickly. But if it's something we hadn't seen before or something that we need to talk to the district about, we'll reach out to you and try to figure out if there's another way of wording some of this, because we want to make sure the documentation is there to make sure that it's an approvable expenditure. We also want to make sure that it's very clear what the district is paying for and what they're not paying for with ESSER funds. And then as we go forward, if we look back, we say, yep, we covered all that. Here's how they used it. And of course, on your end, you'll have the documentation that says, yep, this is how we use the funds and this is how we use this expansion of our cafeteria or whatever it may be. So the information you provide can prevent a lot of delays. So, if you're getting ready to upload stuff to that FactPack system, and you type in that note, remember, there's a lot of us reading it, and the more you can put in there and the easier it is to sort of see and understand, that may prevent questions from us later. And don't hesitate if you're just thinking about doing something to pick up the phone. Certainly, I'm here to talk to you about ESSER and construction, or if it's something we need to get the project managers on, we can set up a short call just to clear the path and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that you won't run into any hurdles. Okay, Oksana, you can go to the next one. And again, provide narrative so we know. And if it's something, like I said, that we haven't seen before, or maybe it's a little questionable, we're going to ask questions. You can attach all kinds of documentation in FactPack. I'm going to give a shout out to a certain district in Western Kentucky. They knew we were going to ask them 100 questions, so they went ahead and uploaded basically an Excel document explaining, they broke out their funds to say, here's what we're using of ESSER out of this total project, and here's exactly what it's going for. And it's very detailed, very clean, very straightforward. And it took us, 20 minutes to read through it and say, they've kind of nailed this. It really explains how they're using the ESSER funds appropriately. So they did a great job, and that prevented a delay. And when we're reviewing these in Frankfurt, there's just a handful of us that are reviewing them, and it can take us some time to get together. So any questions you can answer just by providing, a little more narrative goes a long way. If we do have to talk to the U.S. Department of Education, unfortunately, the response can be very slow. I know we've asked them questions, and it's just they're like us. They've got other work to do, and they've got 50 states to deal with. So it may take a while to get an answer from them. And if you are going to use multiple fund sources, what are your ESSER funds paying for specifically? This is probably one of the most important things. So if you've got $1 million project and $500,000 is in ESSER, what's that paying for? And if you say, hey, ESSER is only going toward my HVAC work, and $500,000 in general funds is going to pay for, I don't know, something else, then that helps us say, oh, okay, it's very clear that he or she is using ESSER funds for the HVAC and not, bleachers or something else. So this helps us. And very important is your GMAP updated. And of course, that goes through Thelma Hawkins' shop, but you want to make sure that your spending plan has been updated as well. All right, Oksana, next, please. So here's a couple resources. The one I look at a lot is that very top one. It's actually a really good document. It's got some great questions in it. The U.S. Department of Ed also has some facility upgrades, renovations, and construction, fairly recent, September 2nd, so just a couple months ago. And then, of course, there's the KDE guidance that's been out there for a while. I think it was in February or so that we sent out. And these are hyperlinks if we send you this document. But you'll be able to, read through those documents. But I do strongly suggest look especially at the top one. When you read through that, it does explain some of the ins and outs, and it does talk about the pitfalls of using it for construction and gets into a little more of the detail, and some of which I'm not super familiar with. That's why I have my facilities branch, but it does help you understand the totality of some of these projects. And, basically one of the warnings that we've given a few times now is, obviously the Davis-Bacon Act is important. You don't want to be in non-compliance with that, but also if you feel like your project may not be finished on time, or you're just through delays or whatever, it's very possible that you're going to have to use your own funds to finish up a project, because this money will, eventually, finish up and the award date will end. So just keep that always in the front of your mind when you're thinking about, we're going to do this work, because I know just the volume we're seeing of construction, you may not be able to find an HVAC guy very quickly, or you may not be able to get a project started very quickly because of delays elsewhere. So Oksana, I think that's it. Last slide, I believe. Yeah. So we can go to questions. If there are any questions.
So if we go, excuse me, if we go to the first one there, with regards to new construction and ESSER funds, when can we transfer money from our ESSER grants to the construction fund?
I have an answer, and I cannot remember that one off the top of my head. I have an answer in an email, I think. If you'll email me, I will send that out to you, because I think we've got, I want to say Karen Conway sent me an email some time ago, but it seems like there's a period where you can transfer it to, and remember, you're drawing this money down, I think. So if you can send me an email, and I'll get that out to you. And if everybody needs more clarification on that, we'll send something out to the list, or put it out on our website or something, so you can see the answer as well.
And then the follow-up for that one, for our other funds, we transfer the funding at the time the BG1 is approved. And if that holds, would the project necessarily need to be complete by the deadline for the ESSER funds?
I think, and Thelma can clarify this, I think the way they word it is obligate. And I thought she said at CASBO that term has not changed, but they're very, it's a very strict definition of obligate. So you may want to check with Thelma on that to see exactly when, obligating and what exactly that means, because it obviously may mean something very different to us than it does to the U.S. Department of Ed.
All right. Next question. Would you suggest that we do the spreadsheet in conjunction with our architect to create the Excel? If we use it primarily for materials, do you want to detail the materials purchased?
Well, I'll give you an example. The one I saw that I thought was pretty good was just, it wasn't super detailed, like we're buying all of these, we're buying steel with this money, we're buying drywall or anything like that. But it was more about just I would say, half a page or more of just, of our ESSER funds, this is what we're using it for, and really just typed it out like a narrative to say, we're going to, renovate these restrooms to use better material that's easier cleaned. The design, I think, was more focused on spacing in restrooms, what I want to say barriers, but that's probably a bad word for it, but partitions, as well as, I think in this case too, they were using some for HVAC, but also talked about, keeping students separated through the design of a school, for example. And, everything they mentioned, like even having, when they do this renovation or new construction, it would be like a wider hallway. Well, that wider hallway means that you can keep students further apart. Or if you do have, for example, COVID in one wing of the school in a certain grade, that the other grades aren't mixed in with that grade as well. So something like that. But if you need an example, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me sharing, what they've typed up. I'm certainly happy to send you what we've got so far, and some good examples, I think, that kind of give you an idea. I don't think we need an 18-mile list of all the materials we're buying. It's more of just a pretty high level narrative of, this is how we want to use the funds and how it's going to, help prevent and prepare for COVID and all that.
Has there been any discussion of extension of the spending deadlines with the cost availability of supplies and materials?
No, not as this is federal money. That's not a discussion I would have. I have not heard that from Thelma or any of my other program people that I've talked to. But of course, if we do catch wind, we'll certainly let everybody know, because that would be some huge news. So,
can you give us information about the ramifications of using federal funds for construction? How does that affect future disposal, for example?
Oksana, if you'll go back a couple slides, there's some more detail in those. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, it's about, it'll say more compliance on the slide, Oksana. I think it's slide 7 or something like that. It should be slide 7. Basically, I think there's some more guidance out there. This is pretty high level what we were doing today, but we can check and see if we can get some specifics on disposal of these assets once that property or equipment's no longer needed. And if you'll shoot me an email, I'll be glad to see what I can track down for you.
Where do we draw the line on projects that are covered from ESSER funds? Example, HVAC, does that include replacement of ceiling materials?
So that's a good question. And I think a lot of it is, we would look at, in that something like that case, is that if it's going to benefit you to replace HVAC, and that requires obviously and I might have Greg chime in on this because I'm going to get the terminology wrong. When you're doing a renovation, you may have to move ductwork, you may have to move some ceiling stuff. That is part of that project, and I believe that would be acceptable. And if you're in doubt, let me know. We'll kind of check and see. And we kind of put this through a little work group at KDE. But it's like doing a renovation in a restroom. You're going to replace the tile, and obviously you replace the urinals and the toilets and the sinks. Well, that's part of that entire renovation. And that to me is, this is, the total renovation would be acceptable, because you're trying to do it so that the restroom is more anti-COVID, if you will. And the same with your HVAC. I don't think you can say, well, we're just going to pay for the equipment and that's it, because there's additional cost with that. Obviously, installation, there's ceiling tiles, you might have to move ductwork. Electrical work is another one. You may have to upgrade your electric as well to get a new system to work. That happens. So when in doubt, though, if you're not quite sure, let me know, and I'll be glad to go ahead and kind of pre-float that upstairs and with the folks that we're talking to, and kind of see what their thoughts are on that too. And really, the devil's really in the details on this. That's one thing we've learned pretty quickly is, that's why we may ask some dumb questions, and you'll have to pardon us for it, but we want to know exactly, what we're looking at and not assume anything. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
How does the use of ESSER funds relate to Kentucky price contract items like roofing?
That I don't know. Greg, do you have any thoughts on that? Or John or Marcus? I can't see who else
I
is on
don't
here.
think that the co-op pricing necessarily reflects Davis-Bacon wage rates. It's something that would have to be vetted through them.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Those are structured to solicit a price breakdown based off of the criteria of the bid. So whatever the origin of the cooperative purchase agreement from whatever state it's from, the devil's in the details on how that advertisement was constructed. If they asked for federal wage rates, are they wage rates for Kentucky included? So all that has to be kind of pre-vetted, and we don't do that in the facilities branch.
Yeah, Davis-Bacon is, regionalized. There are different areas within the state. So
Yeah, that's right. So it's a good point.
So I guess to answer specifically the question is, how does it apply? Well, the federal wage rates will apply regardless of the origin of the quote. It's the responsibility of the using agent, if they're going to attempt to go through a cooperative purchase agreement, that cooperative purchase agreement correctly advertised for such wage rates.
yeah, so it's a question of whether it's just a material purchase or whether it includes material and labor.
Okay. So good clarifying part there, Greg and Marcus. Thank you all.
All right. We currently use a portable toilet at an athletic complex. Could we build new restrooms and use ESSER funds for this project?
So with that one, we'd probably ask you to give us a bit more detail and give us some time to mull that one over. And I could even, if you want to give me a real setup a call, I'll be glad to even talk you through, some of the different angles on it. So if you've currently got portables, we'd have to understand, is that a COVID risk in itself, or what would a new restroom do as far as preventing and preparing for COVID? And so it always circles back to that question. Even something as, simple as we're going to add 2 classrooms on the end of this wing, or we're going to gut out this old storage room and use it for some kind of classroom, or some of these are very straightforward, but something like that, I'd say we'd probably want some more detail. So shoot me an email. We'll set up a meeting like next week or something and talk about that a little bit and see what we can figure out.
When a project has multiple funding sources, if ESSER is being applied to a specific scope of the work, such as HVAC, will the balance of the remaining scope also be subject to DBA requirements?
So recently, one of the districts, and I never did hear the answer to this, but they were reaching out. I know they were trying to set up a call with Mr. Jackson with the Department of Labor. Is they wanted to know that sort of an answer to that is the whole project subject to, is it just that, the ESSER funds going to HVAC, for example. Mr. Jackson was going to look into it, but I never did get an answer. So I think let's table that question until he's on here with us, because I know that's going to be one of the first ones he has to answer. And I'll also check with the district, I think, that was going to ask that. I never did hear back I meant to email them this morning actually to ask them if they ever got an answer, but it's a good question.
So do we transfer the money at the beginning when a BG is approved, or spend it out of the Fund 360 and draw on it each month?
That's the same one. I'll get that answer out to everybody, because I think that's, and I actually got the email. I can see that a certain district sent me that. I'll get that answer out to everybody, because that was a very specific answer, and I don't want to botch that one for you and get that everybody on the wrong page.
Mm-hmm. If a district has a 1940 school with coal burning furnace, would it not make more sense to build a new school with ESSER funds instead of pumping millions into a school upgrading the HVAC?
So that's a great question, and that's one that we've talked about internally a lot, is at what point do you build new and what point do you renovate? I think you also have to keep in mind your DFP and what your district's needs are. Again, the U.S. Department of Ed, quote, discourages new construction, but, what does that really mean? But in other language, of course, it will say, if it doesn't make any sense to, renovate a school or a building, you may want to consider building new. And if your problem is the coal burning furnace, you know, what part of that new school is, you know, going to be for COVID or built and using ESSER funds. Now, can you argue that a whole school could be used to pay with it with ESSER funds? That's probably hard to do. Now, can parts of that new school be for ESSER funds? Sure. You know, HVAC's pretty easy one, and maybe some of the design features of your school. And you know, I think early on we talked to a Western Kentucky district about, you know, they used to pack kids into a gym at the end of the day to get them ready to get on the bus. Well, that's probably a big negative now. So they wanted to do something and expand some spaces so the kids would be spaced out when they wait for the bus. But, you know, part of that may have been for ESSER, but part of that also may have been restricted, you know, just a restricted fund. So something that big, I would strongly suggest that we talk and kind of walk through what you really want to do. And we look at your DFP, we look at, you know, your district needs as a whole. We look at your other fund sources too, and to see, you know, can we do part of this with ESSER, or would it make more sense to, you know, not use ESSER? But ideally, when you read all the intent of this money, it's really to act now. What can you do now to prepare for COVID? And obviously, we're still not out of the woods. We keep getting, you know, variations of COVID. So, you know, as you're looking at how to spend this money, that's, you know, what we do now to mitigate it in the future, and hopefully not new viruses, but that may very well happen. If a new HVAC system and better ventilation system in a school would help mitigate it, then that may be the avenue you go down. So if you want to talk about that further, absolutely let me know.
Jay?
Yes, Greg.
We have learned within the last week that there may be other federal funds available related to energy that might address the coal-fired furnace.
Yeah, was this the infrastructure thing we just got?
Yes.
Yeah, that we haven't sent out yet. So we did get some information, and we'll try to get that out to everybody. Greg and I are still, we're actually probably here in 30 minutes or so. We're going to try to catch up with each other and talk about an email we got that may have some opportunities associated with it. It's good news for once too about the infrastructure bill. So we'll get that out to everybody when we have some time to kind of digest what they were trying to tell us in this email, because there's quite a bit of information. But thank you, Greg. That was a good point.
All right. Other school districts are using ESSER funds to replace roofs. Could you tell us a little bit of what their justification might be?
Yeah, and I think Greg could probably speak to this some too. I don't want to throw him under the bus, but it's also part of the envelope of the building. So as you're looking at air quality and also some of the age of the buildings and such, we've seen obviously HVAC windows that obviously can open and, you know, close, but that envelope of the building, and also air quality is impacted by mold, mildew, et cetera. So districts that have had, or a school building that has a roof that's had, you know, a lot of repairs and some leaks and things like that, can lead to obviously mold, mildew issues. So that's kind of how that's tied into air quality as far as I know. Greg, do you have anything to add to that?
No, you nailed it.
Okay.
And I think you just answered this next question. Considering roof issues would lead to mold and other air quality issues, are roof replacements a feasible use of ESSER funds? So I think you just answered that.
Yeah, we've seen, I don't want to say we've seen a lot of roofs come through, but we've seen quite a few. And again, you know, documentation and justification. Take the time to say, you know, we're wanting to replace this roof and here's why. We've got leaks everywhere, or we've got some, you know, mold, mildew issues that need to be mitigated, like in this end of our building. And when we replace the roof, you know, we're going to do it this way. And it's, you know, as long as you can sort of justify it, because it can help with your air quality. And of course, you know, being able to have obviously a building with good air quality is going to be very important. So I think you can, you know, kind of figure that out on your own and say, this is how we're going to justify this. So
that's what we have at the moment, Jay.
And as always, can you go to that last slide, Oksana? If you've got more questions, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. If I know I just got an email about talking to one district already. So, you know, we can always set up quick calls and talk. Because we don't want to say, you know, yes or no to anything before we have some time to, you know, go through it. We want to make obviously good decisions so we don't have problems later. And we want to make sure that districts are, you know, obviously making good decisions, but also on the tail end of this that there's no problems with the things we said. Sure, this looks pretty good to us, and we want to make sure we're doing thorough work that when we talk to you all that we've covered every corner and we make sure that we've got good information in there. And again, the documentation, it shouldn't be that difficult. It's a little different because obviously with regular old FSPK money coming in to do a roof, you're just saying, yeah, our roof's in bad shape and we're going to do it. It's on our DFP. But with ESSER, we've got a couple hoops to jump through, but it's not too bad. And again, I'm super happy to help you walk through and push back on things and see what we can come up with, and look at the different options you have as far as how to pay for this stuff, if it's a good, easy use of the money, if it makes sense, or if it doesn't. We've had to tell a few districts no on a few projects, and you all know I hate saying no to people, but you can tell, and I'm sure these are very valid projects, but the uses just didn't line up with the with the ESSER funds. So just keep in mind, we're always short-staffed at KDE, so it may take me a minute to get back to you, but we can set something up pretty easily. And somebody, I think we had more questions, Steve.
Yeah, one more just came through.
Okay, sure.
Would the roof replacement be only for school buildings or for any building in a district that houses employees?
Oh, well, that's a good question. So I this is going to be for your buildings in general. So I'll give you an example. If you've got a bus garage with a pretty, gnarly roof that's causing some mildew issues, and this is going to sound silly, but our employees are people too, so we got to take care of those as well, especially our bus drivers. We want to make sure that the environment that people are working in, obviously the environment that children learn in is important, but also the environment these folks are working in. Central office, is, and I would look at this as, again, your district need in total, and look around you. And if this is a very pressing need and, it qualifies for ESSER, it can improve the air quality, it's going to help mitigate COVID. If you replace, for example, windows in a bus garage, because when the weather's nice, you can open those windows, and now the windows don't open, think it through. But I think most of you can find a way to, explain that, yeah, our building is bad, or we need better ventilation, or we need a roof and things like that. But again, if you're not sure, if you just want to bounce it around, let me know. We're glad to do it. But great question. Thank you for that one.
And that's all that's come in.
All right. Well, again, thanks you all. We're going to have, I think it's either January 5th or 6th. I can't remember, but we'll send out, there's another invite that got sent out. And that will be hopefully with Mr. Jackson from the Department of Labor. And any other, questions or issues that pop up over the next couple of months, we'll be bringing those out to the, what we would call the facilities webinars, and also the finance webinars. And often they kind of cross paths with each other, so you may get a double dose of some of this stuff, but we're going to want to get this information out to you all. But if you do have any more questions, let me know. I'll be glad to answer them as soon as I can. And if we don't happen to talk to you, everybody have a very safe holiday season, which will be here before we know it, apparently. Thank you all.
I also want to remind the group that the recording and the PowerPoint presentation will be accessible on the website, on the KDE website, within like 1 to 2
days. Yeah, this will be recorded and we'll have it out on the website very soon.